Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today. You know, this is one of those days when I should have hit record right at the very start because we had so much fun in our early chat, but we'll repeat it. So like I said, we're going to have a great time talking with Mark Carpenter today. So welcome, Mark. How are you doing?
Thank you, Deb. I'm so excited to be here with you. We did have some great conversation before you hit record, so I hope we can replicate that.
I know. Hopefully we didn't just wear it out and we'll go, hi, how are you? But you would think with what we're going to talk about, we'll be okay.
I'm pretty sure we'll be fine.
Yeah. So let me tell folks just a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Mark Carpenter is a serial storyteller. Even as a child, he loved to tell stories, mainly to get attention. Now he teaches people how to more intentionally tell stories that teach, lead, sell, and inspire to accomplish business and personal goals. He is the co-author of the best-selling book, Master Storytelling: How to Turn Your Experiences into Stories That Teach, Lead, and Inspire. And he is the co-creator of the Master Storytelling Workshop. When he's not training, speaking, coaching, or creating new content, Mark is likely spending time outdoors near his home in Utah, playing the piano, bragging about his wonderful grandchildren, or writing children's books. So again, Mark, welcome to the program.
Boy, I listened to that and I go, who is that interesting person? That sounds much more interesting than I feel like my life is.
I know. You know, we hear our bios, we're like, ooh, yeah. But of course, it's all true. But it always makes me wonder, how is it that you got to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a long and wandering path. And you can imagine there's probably several stories that I could tell along there. But I'll kind of get to the main point of it. About 6 years ago, I helped a friend write a book. Mm-hmm. I basically was ghost writing for him. It was his ideas. I didn't want to take it away from him. And so we made this agreement, and I kind of helped ghost write the book. I got to the end of that process, and I had the writing bug. And I've been a writer most of my life in various different forms. And I said to my wife, I feel like I need to write my book, but I don't know what my book is yet. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me, as only those who are closest to us can, and said, oh, I know what it is. And I'm like,
well, do tell.
How can you know what it is if I don't know? How can you know? Mm-hmm. She says, no, you need to write a book about how you take these everyday experiences that you have and you turn them into stories that teach a lesson. Mm. And my first thought was, well, that's not a book. That's just what people do. Right. And she said, no. You do that naturally. Somehow in your life, you have developed that. But that's a skill that you could help other people develop. And I started talking with my good friend Daryl Harmon about that. And Daryl was at a place where he had some time. And so we got together and co-authored the book, Master Storytelling, and created the workshop that goes along with it. And now we, as the bio said, help people more intentionally take those real life experiences and turn them into stories that can teach, lead, sell, and inspire.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and storytelling is a skill, and I think the problem is so many people think, I can just get up there and ramble. But no, it is a learned skill that you need to do. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the distinction we make is between sharing an experience and telling a story. So I could share the experience that I had of the last vacation that I went on. And I could tell you about all the different things that we did on that vacation. And it might be interesting, it might be enlightening at some point, but there's probably not a point that you're making at the end. And so we look at it as, how do you take that experience and winnow it down into what's the lesson that you learn from that experience?
Okay.
That's the story that you're telling. And story has a structure more than just I'm going to walk you through the chronology of everything that happened in this, and then you take from that what you want. There's a point at the end of it that I'm trying to make with that story. And so that's why the subtitle of the book is around teach, lead, and inspire. If I had to do it again, I'd put sell in there as well, because we talked to a lot of sales professionals about using storytelling in sales.
Right.
And so that's the key difference. It's the intentionality of, I am telling this story to make this point, to teach, lead, sell, or inspire.
So why is this a good skill for leaders to have? Because I think the problem is they think we need to tell people just the facts, ma'am, right? Didn't some police TV show did that? Just the facts, ma'am. And they don't embellish. They certainly don't want to tell you anything personal. So why is it important that leaders learn how to be good storytellers?
Yeah. And as I start this, I want to make the point, I'm not discounting the importance of facts.
Right. We still need that information.
Yeah. The information is still really important. But storytelling is how people make sense of the world. This is uniquely human to us. This is how we connect with each other and how we really understand what's going on. Let me give you for instance. Years ago, I was working in a corporate communications department for a small software company. It had about 150 people. We had a new CEO. The new CEO came in and he was very much a numbers guy. The previous CEO, he was the founder. He was the one with the vision. He was a storyteller. He loved to connect to people. First company meeting with a bunch of software engineers, and I'm helping the CEO create his slide deck. And he says, I just want to go through every point of EBITDA with everybody. Now, if you're not familiar with EBITDA, now business leaders on the podcast are probably familiar with that. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization.
Lots of numbers.
Lots of numbers, lots of details, which are very important financial measures.
Right.
But think about the audience. If you've got mostly out of the 150 people in the company, probably 100 of them were software engineers. They understand EBITDA and what that means to them. And so my counsel to him was, okay, but explain what this means to the members of the team. What does it mean to a software developer when you're sharing all of these EBITDA numbers? And he says, well, they should get that. And I said, they don't.
Right.
They don't.
And they're not going to tell you they don't.
Been through, yeah. And if they've been through an accounting class, it was very early in their college education and they don't remember it. You need to make this connection for them. No, they need to figure that out or they don't belong here. Was the CEO's response.
Yikes.
Now, you tell me, Deb, when the CEO stood up there and presented all these EBITDA numbers, what were the 100 software engineers in the audience doing?
Sleeping.
Yeah, checking out one way or another. There were some that were literally dozing off.
Right.
There were others that were on their devices.
On their phones. Yeah.
Yeah. There were others that were doing other things. I don't even remember all the things they were doing, but they were not making the connection. And think about the impact with this new CEO who's trying to connect with this team that he's now leading. He missed.
He just struck out.
Connection. Yeah, and it's not that he was a bad leader, because he was a good leader and he really was passionate about us hitting the numbers, and that's important. But he didn't make the connections with the people. And so I look at it as a missed opportunity to connect. Storytelling will connect you with the people that you're leading. It will help them understand the why behind the what that you're trying to get people to do.
Right. So, I've talked to people on the program before about storytelling, but we just kind of do it at a real high level. And one of the questions I've never asked is it okay to make things up? Can it be a fiction story? And do you have to admit that it is?
There's a place in the world for fiction stories. There's a lot of great business books out there that are corporate fables. That is not the kind of storytelling we teach. That's a different thing. We encourage people to use their own real life experiences or the real life experiences of those around them to tell the story. Now, I tell people all the time, your story needs to be truthful. It doesn't necessarily need to be accurate.
Right.
In other words, I tell stories often where I change the name of the person.
Right. We got to protect the innocent.
Exactly. The other thing that I encourage people to do along these lines is if you're borrowing somebody else's story, admit that you're borrowing it. Don't try to put yourself into
this. So I could say Mark once did such and such and so and so.
Yeah, you could say my friend Deb has had this experience that she shared with me that I think there's a great lesson that we learned from it. And then I'm going to share your experience. If I put that as my experience, I run the risk of somebody asking me a detail that I don't know the answer to.
Or they've heard it from that person and they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. They know the person. It's like, that sounds exactly like Deb's story. How could that exactly happen? And so there's risks in that. So be honest, be authentic about it. The authenticity of your stories, of your experience, is what really is going to make the connection with people too.
Right.
That I was leading a training. It was a trainer facilitation workshop. And one of the things that people had to do as they trained a part of this content was to share a story. And one of the people in their teach back was sharing this experience. And it was funny. It was hilarious the way she was presenting it. And so I could tell she was exaggerating some things. But as she went on, I started to just get this little nagging thing in the back of my brain. It was like, there's something off with this story. And so as we were doing the debrief, some people were saying, oh, we thought your story was hilarious. That was so funny. We loved that. And I said, did that really happen? And she looked a little chagrined.
You got a long dramatic pause, right?
Not really. Yeah. It wasn't even a dramatic pause. It was the awkward pause.
That
was there.
Busted.
Said, well, not really. I kind of made it up. And I went, yeah, I felt that. I could feel that a little bit. And so you run the risk of coming across as inauthentic. And as a leader, especially, you do not want to be in that position.
Right. Because then they don't believe anything else you say.
Right. You damage your own credibility.
Right. And obviously there's TMI, you don't want to share too much. And we've all seen examples of that, right? Whether it was in personal or, professional settings. But it's, I think the thing with stories is it really does help us, as you said, to connect with people, to know, oh my gosh, Mark's gone through the same thing I have, or, our company isn't doing as well as I thought, but here's why, and here's how it affects me. It's like you said with those software engineers, I really don't care about the high level stuff. I want to know, do I have a job tomorrow?
Yeah. Or what can I do to impact the direction the company is going?
Right.
And sometimes this is a mistake that we make as leadership too. We put out mission, vision, values, and those are important things. Right. It's important to have clear direction. But what do those things look like? Because
we carve them in stone and we put them on the walls.
Yeah. But the key is that the story is going to get you from words on the wall to behaviors in the hall. And the behaviors in the hall are what going to stick with people. What does it look like to show integrity in our company? What does it look like to put the customer first? And I'm using my air quotes there because those are very common kinds of phrases that we put into those mission, vision, value types of statements. And they're important. They're great things to focus on. But people need to know, what does it look like? So as you're talking about those things, say, let me give you an example of what putting the customer first looks like. Or maybe even an example of, here's an example of what putting the customer first doesn't look like.
Right.
We don't want to be in that situation. I tell a story sometime that of my sister's experience, that she had this terrible interaction with people right after her husband died about some of the medical bills. And I won't go through the whole thing, but the crux of it is they said, well, this is in your husband's name. We need to talk to him.
and she said, don't we wish?
But he recently passed away. This medical bill was the ambulance taking him to the hospital.
The final.
That he died. She says, well, I can't really move this forward unless we have a conversation with him. And she's like, what is this person?
Are you not paying attention?
And everybody that listens to that story goes, oh my gosh, what is wrong with that person? That's a story that you could tell to say, we don't want to be that.
Right.
How would you have handled that differently so that we're actually treating our customers like people? And those are great stories to sink in the values in practice within the organization.
Right. And that practice are things like empowering the employees, because those people had a script and they were told, you do not deviate from the script. One would hope that as they're saying that, they're thinking, I can't believe I'm having to say this. I just can't believe I'm having to ask her dead husband to talk to us. And so it's not just the story, it is that process. Have you told your employees it's okay to say, I am so sorry? I mean, that would have gone so far with your sister. And then they could have said, we'll figure this out. We need to know what to do. And, it's just, but, and treating those people like they're human also, because she didn't, the people didn't want to be saying that. They knew what they were saying was absolutely stupid, we would hope. But yeah, it's this whole process.
Yeah. And it's really giving people permission to be human. And one of the best ways to be human is to tell the story, because this is how we connect as a species. Right. This is how we, like I said earlier, this is how we make sense of the world, is through those stories. And so it connects us as human beings.
Right. And it does connect us. And I love that you mentioned that it's good for sales, because that really is one of the big things. And that goes all the way back to, Carnegie and all of those various sales things on connecting with people, right? They sent out birthday cards, physical birthday cards, right? But when they tell the story, they can be talking about toner for a printer. You talk about, we were able to get somebody their toner and they printed their wedding invitations. Things where people can just, it's that way that they connect with them.
Yeah. And so I'll take that toner example. You could even tell this story of, I was talking with one of my other clients and they were so frustrated because they couldn't get the toner that they needed, and they missed an important deadline on an important project. That's why when we work with our clients, we have an automatic renewal on your toner, and we base it on your usage, so that you will never have that situation. You're not going to have to experience the pain that person experienced. Right. And now that they're one of my clients, they aren't experiencing that pain anymore. Right. And that's a really broad example. Your story would be better and would be more specific, but it's sharing with people, what does this mean to me? What kind of pain am I overcoming? Right. People don't buy products and services. Right. They buy alleviation of pain. Right. They buy something that's going to help them overcome a problem or prevent a problem. Right.
And it's funny. I'm a marketing person. That's my background. And so, we were taught, fix somebody's pain. And I recently have come to the conclusion that there's something else. How do we give them pleasure? Right. And, and so I like, and that's also the thing, how can we help them to do something good or achieve something good, whatever it is? It's not just let's fix their pain. It's let's bring them pleasure.
I was talking just last week to somebody who wants to bring in our master storytelling workshop for their sales team. And it's their partner sales team that they're working with. And I asked him, I said, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to do by having these people tell stories better? And he said, they work okay with their clients. I don't know that they have as strong a connection with their clients as they could. And I want them to start connecting with their clients on a more personal level, because that's going to allow them to make it easier to maintain those clients going forward and to keep that client happy. So that's to that same side. I want to make a stronger connection that is going to bring us better relationships as we go forward.
Right. Well, we've all heard we work with people we know, like, and trust. Yeah. And, the trust comes from those stories.
Well, the know and the like comes from those stories.
True.
Too.
You immediately, don't want to work with Mark. Nope, sorry.
Yeah. Or so I'll go back to our preliminary conversation before we hit record. We started talking, and all of a sudden we started sharing some experiences and some commonalities and some things that we could relate to. And all of a sudden we like each other more. We know each other a little better. we trust each other more. I'll throw into that, not to get too geeky on the science part of it, but part of it is that what happens in our brains when we hear a well-told story from someone. Dr. Paul Zak at Claremont Graduate University has done research around this.
And you talked about this in your book.
Yes. Yeah. This is in the book. This is one of the fascinating things that I learned when I took my wife's advice and actually wrote the book, because I found out, oh, there's reasons this works so well. I had kind of naturally developed this skill, but there's reasons that it works. And Dr. Zak identified these 3 chemicals that I just think is fascinating. That when you introduce characters that the listener can relate to, the listener has an increase of oxytocin in their brain.
Okay.
This is the trust hormone. You get an increase of oxytocin if someone that you care about, someone that you love, gives you a hug for 2 or 3 seconds. You get a slight increase in oxytocin. It creates connection. It creates trust. So think about this. If I'm trying to get a team that I'm leading to trust me more, if I'm trying to get a client that I'm working with to trust me more, I want them to have an increase of oxytocin as they're talking to me.
Right.
The second thing is that when you introduce some conflict into your story, when you introduce that pain or that lack of the pleasure, they get a slight increase of cortisol. Now, cortisol in small amounts increases the attention of the listener.
They want to hear how it's resolved.
There you go. They're asking what next, and so they're engaged with what you're saying. Isn't that what you want with your clients? Isn't that what you want with your team? And then the third thing he identified was the neurotransmitter dopamine, which you get when the story comes to some kind of satisfactory conclusion, or where you can come up with a better conclusion than what happened. I used the example of my sister's experience earlier that things didn't go well. But when you end that story with, what would you have done different? Well, I get this sense of satisfaction and accomplishment because I can come up with a better solution. Right. Or if I hear somebody that overcame a problem, I can go, ooh, I could get that too. And dopamine is that sensation that you get when you check something off your to-do list, or you level up on a video game, or you just have a successful conclusion to something. And it gives you that kind of feeling of satisfaction.
Right.
And so think about all of those reactions that you get from that, the changes in the brain chemistry and telling a story. Those are the things that we want and that connect us as a species as we're working with other people.
Right.
We will be seen more as the person you know, trust, and like because of that story that you've told.
Right. Right. And it's okay to include some of those facts and figures in there.
Oh, absolutely.
You might say we increase something by 50%. Their profit turned around. They solved this problem. You can include those. So for the people who are the facts and the figures, then you just include it in there. But that is, again, where you have to be authentic. And so, should people practice their stories? Or are those people who are just naturally Mark Twain?
No, I think you mentioned this earlier. Storytelling is a skill, and it's developed like any other skill. And so I'm gonna throw this back to you, Deb, because we talked about this a little bit in our introduction too. Your very first podcast episodes that you hosted, how good were you as a podcast host?
Oh, not good. I am pretty sure it was not good. Now, I had a great time, and I can actually tell you who it was. We were talking social media, and I had a wonderful time talking with her. But did I know how to do it? No. And so I'm sure our enthusiasm, and I do not go back and listen to those old episodes. Oh, no. But I had a great time talking with her. But was it, an award-winning? No.
And so how did you get better?
I practiced. I've been doing this a long time. You're episode 933, and I'm still learning. I mean, that's the important thing too.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that in. I'm still learning too. There's still times that I'll bring something into a story the first time I tell it and go, ooh, that didn't work. And you can't know that until you actually do it. Now, certainly don't just go off the cuff, prepare, identify what's the purpose that I'm trying to get to in this story. That's the starting place. Is what is the intention that I'm leading to? What's the message that I want people to walk away from? Right. That's going to lead them to action, inspire them to change, teach them something important, move them to buy, or to at least consider more along that sales process. And so you need to practice and prepare with that, but listen and learn. Look in the faces of the people that you're telling the stories to. You'll
did they fall asleep?
Yeah. Or did they go, I didn't quite get that. What does it lead to? Practice with friends. Practice with yourself. We all have these great little devices that are great practice devices. That
we hate watching ourselves, but it's okay.
We hate watching ourselves. We hate listening to ourselves. But if you record yourself telling a story and then listen back to it, if you can get beyond, I hate how I looked there, I hate the sound of my voice, you will get, that phrase didn't work. That didn't make sense in the context of what I'm trying to get to. And so you can do some self-practice that way as well. But it's a skill just like any other skill.
Right.
And people can develop it who are not natural storytellers. They just need to work at it.
Right. And you do have a workshop, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what about things like extemporaneous, see if I can say it, speaking or improv classes? Does that help with some of this?
Yeah, I think that helps with just getting your mind around moving quickly.
Okay.
Because improv comedy is all about how quickly can I process something and bounce off the other person. When it comes to storytelling, the great skill that you develop there is which of these stories in my story bank is appropriate to use in this situation.
Right.
Because as you build up those stories, it's, this is the time that story is going to work and have the impact that I need it here. And so that's really the skill that you get from any kind of improv work. Do you have to have that to be a good storyteller? Not necessarily. Most of us are in situations where we can prepare the story and we don't have to improv it in the moment. The good news is, and this goes back to, should we make up stories? If it's my own experience, it's so much easier for me to remember the story.
Right.
Because I was there. I lived it. And so I don't have to think, how did this story go again? And
it's kind of like if you lie, you have to remember what the lie was.
There you go. It's your own experience. It's your own story. So it's easier to tell in those moments. It kind of takes some of that stress off of those impromptu moments.
Right. And obviously there are people who have to really prepare and have to write everything down. I am more of an extemporaneous speaker. And it was fun years ago when I took speech in college. I never prepared. I mean, almost always it was extemporaneous. And the really funny thing was my professor never knew. I mean, I was that fast on my feet. But I don't know if that was good or bad, but, we do. And now I might outline it. I mean, it depends on what it is, right? If I have to have visuals, then I'm going to have those done in advance and I'll know kind of what, but it's knowing what your skill set is. If you're the person that needs to write it down, then write it down, but God forbid, don't read your notes. No, that's where a good speech class comes in. Right. But, just know what your own strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah. And again, it's knowing the intent that you have behind that story.
Right.
That helps people. I refer to it as it helps people land the plane. Sometimes we get caught up in telling our experience and we're wandering around looking for the point. And so the story kind of goes on and on and on. And the listener's sitting there going, where are we going with this?
Are we ever going to finish this?
Yeah. And if you know what the point is you're trying to make, you can self-edit out the portions of that experience that don't really lead to that point.
Right.
And so the intentionality of what am I trying to get across here? What's the action that I want people to take? What's the takeaway that I want them to absorb and really noodle on after the story is done? When you know that, it directs you a little bit more on preparing that story and delivering it.
Right. And in most cases, shorter is better. I mean, you want to give them enough, but you don't want to go on. You use the example in the book of the guy who was telling something and he said, well, this happened on Tuesday. Well, maybe it was Friday. The day of the week didn't matter, for the most part. Now, if it was Christmas or New Year's, that might have made a difference to the story. But you want to back to kind of just the facts. I mean, you want to have the things in it that matter to the story, but the things like, I don't remember if it was Tuesday. Now, that said, when we were in COVID, right? That was what I'm like, I have no idea what day of the week it is. And we made it a joke. It was kind of one of those where, okay, it's just day, but that kind of went along with the story to be able to say, I don't know if it's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. I'm just here today.
I had somebody during COVID say, this happened on Blur's Day.
I know, I like Blur's Day.
They all run together, so it just all feels like Blur's Day. Every day seems the same. I thought that was such a great description of what the days felt like during COVID. Right. It's Blur's Day.
But again, people associated with that. They all went, yep, I got it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those things that I haven't thought about that for ages. But it stuck with me so much because of the point you just made, because I could relate to it. I say, yeah, I'm blurring all my days together too. It's hard for me to keep track of days of the week. And then that can be relevant in the story that you're telling because it sets up that emotional connection of things that of experiences we've had in common.
Right. Yeah. Shared experiences are obviously one of the best ways to bond with people.
Yeah. And you have to be a little careful with that because this is knowing your audience. You have to know who your audience is. So for example, we were talking about your pets a little bit earlier. And if I make the assumption that everybody in the audience has had a pet and had a great experience with their pet, and that's the point of my story, I'm going to lose the people who either didn't have pets or maybe had a bad experience with a pet.
Or just don't like them.
Yeah. Well, I'm qualifying that as the bad experience with the pet, but I think. So again, know your audience. So that you can make that connection. It's interesting. People don't make the connection between storytelling and listening. They think that storytelling is one way. This is me telling my story. But it requires us to really listen so that we understand what the needs of the people that we're talking to are to tell the story, to tell the right story, but also tell it in the right way so that it actually makes those connections that we want to make through storytelling.
And adapting to those changes. I've told this before a couple of times when I've been interviewing people. I was giving a presentation about LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn. We love LinkedIn, right? So these were out of work engineers. Now I knew they were out of work. The engineer part should have keyed me in fairly, but I didn't, right? So I was not paying attention to my audience. And so I'm going through my presentation. Now I had a gentleman who arrived late and he made a production of arriving late, right? He's one of those. And so I'm partway through my presentation and I'm telling stories and I was telling stories and I kept saying, we, and he's from the back row stops me and says, you shouldn't be saying we because you haven't done that. And I immediately said, you're right, because he was. I mean, everybody there knew that. And, darn if he didn't interrupt me several more times. And I actually asked him to leave. But, that's part of knowing your audience, and now I was able to immediately adapt. I probably had a couple more we's in there, but, then it was you. And I knew to say, this is what you should be doing and things like that. But yeah, I was, even though he was obnoxious and rude, he was saying what most people in there were probably thinking, and so I needed to, but I could have probably picked that up by watching their facial expressions, because every time I said we, they might've gone, and things like that. But yeah, it is in following, what you're seeing and what you're hearing, are you hearing, or things like that, then okay, this is what's going on. And I need to change in now, not lie, not any of those various things. But like I said, just changing from we to you or I, that helped, with that process.
Yeah. We refer to this as watch your language. And sometimes people think, well, I'm not going to stand up there and use the curse words or anything in my story, but be careful of how your language excludes or includes the people in your audience. A good friend of mine was giving a presentation to a group at Microsoft, and in the middle of it, this wasn't part of the planned presentation. It just kind of popped up in her language, and she said, "Well, and if you want to know more, Google that." Now, think of who the audience is. these are Microsoft employees.
Yes.
And she heard this collective across the group and realized, oh no, they don't use Google here. They use Bing. That's the Microsoft search engine. And she just realized, I have just damaged my credibility in telling this because of that one simple word.
Right.
So again, it's listening, it's knowing your audience and knowing what's going to connect with them.
Right. Well, but she could have turned it into a joke. She could have said,
and she did.
Wait, if you do Google, it's not going to give you the right answers. So we, of course, have to use Bing, right? Something like that. But yeah, that's the part of adapting that we need to be able to do.
Yeah. And again, it's knowing what your intentions are. What is my purpose in telling this story? And knowing who you're telling it to, so that you can connect to them in the right way.
Right. And there are obviously times where it's not appropriate to tell a story. They just want the facts. They, is this going to help me get a better job? Yes, no. Okay. Or whatever it is. And that's okay, but you can weave the stories in later.
Where something personal like that is this going to help me get a job? It's like, okay, but how?
Right.
And the story can tell the how. Now, I think you're right on. Sometimes there's times that we need to share information. Hey, we've only got a half tank of gas. We've got to fill up before we cross the desert.
I don't need to know about when you ran out of gas in 1949.
Right. We don't need the whole story there. There's other times when stories aren't appropriate as well. And I would say in times of emergency or crisis.
Right.
If I see somebody doing something dangerous, I want to stop them from doing the dangerous thing. I may come back later and tell them the story of someone else who was doing exactly what they were doing and lost.
So you knew
arm.
it was dangerous.
Yeah. So that they understand why I was abrupt with them in that moment. But in that moment, I don't need to stop and say, let me share with you why that might be a bad idea, what you're doing right now. Right. Because
get your finger out of the electric socket.
They could still get injured as I'm trying to tell the story. And so, yeah, there are times when it's not as appropriate. Right.
I have those discussions with my mother. I'm like, no, don't need the backstory. Just, you can tell that to me. I just need to know this. In fact, I had it with her last night. And this was one of these funny things. I'm going to go into a story. Here we go. Where when we spent Christmas with her, I watched her TV using my Amazon Prime account, right? So we're sitting here in, Atlanta. She's in Kansas last night. We're watching TV and all of a sudden the TV changes to Amazon. And I'm like, and my husband's, what are you doing? I said, I'm not, the remote's over there. She was doing something on her TV on Amazon. And I don't know why that 1,000 miles away, we needed to change channels. But so what do? I call her, Mom, are you doing something on Amazon? And she starts to go into a story. No. I need to know if you're using Prime. And, and because she was starting to tell me, it's like, no, I need to, and then we went back to her story. But yeah, I mean, it was just, get me the facts, then we can go back.
Yeah.
And that was really weird.
And the story was still pertinent. The story was still interesting. Right. But after you got the answer to the first question.
Yeah, after we discovered why my TV was possessed.
Right. So order matters. And the same goes to when we were talking about using data and information. Sometimes where do you put the data in? You put it in at the beginning, you put it in at the end, you put it in the middle.
Right.
And you may do any one of those things, it just depending on that situation and where it's going to be most relevant for people.
Right. And sometimes, I mean, you need to repeat it depending on what it is, all of those various things. And that is where the practice comes in and knowing your audience, all of those various things.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing about stories. There's this great research project that was done at Stanford where they took 3 groups of graduate students and they gave one group some data and they just verbally gave them the data. They took a second group and they gave them the data, but they also showed them charts and graphs that illustrated the data. That's a leadership thing to do, right? Let's show it in charts and graphs.
Right.
The third group, they gave them the information, but they embedded it into a story that was relevant to them. And then they came back a couple of weeks later and they tested each group on how well they remembered things, how accurately they remember, or how much they remembered, how accurately they remembered it, and what the impact of that information was on them. And one of the things that I found interesting was those first two groups, the groups that got it in just verbal information and the group that got it in charts and graphs. There was no measurable difference in how much or how well they remembered it.
And it was pretty little, I'm guessing.
And it was fairly low. The group that got it in the form of the story remembered more of the information, remembered it more accurately. And this was the second thing that jumped out to me. They found the information more credible.
They had a reason to believe it.
There you go. We think that when we give people a bunch of data and we show it to them in wonderful charts, that's going to increase.
We've said it's important. It's in a chart.
That's right. It was so important. We made a graph out of it. It has to be that important. But people are going to remember it better and actually find the information and the person delivering the information more credible when they understand that why and how it connects to them. That's what comes in the form of the story.
Well, Mark, we've been talking about the fact that some people are good at this. You and I are just kind of natural storytellers, sometimes to my detriment. I will definitely say that. But we've also worked with people, God bless them, are not good at telling stories for whatever reason. So, how do we help them?
Well, first, get my book.
Of course.
And really, learn. It's just goes back to what we were talking about with practicing and learning new skills. First, you have to learn, okay, what is it that makes a story a good story? What is it that makes that experience a good story rather than just an experience that I'm telling? And so learn, find out what that structure is. We teach this in our master storytelling workshop. And then practice and get coaching. And we offer coaching as well to let people tell their stories, get some feedback on it, tell it again, get some feedback, tell it again. And so it blends that practice and feedback that helps people get better at it. But it's like any skill. I go back to the simple one of riding a bike, and maybe that's not simple for some people, but it's this fairly common one. You can't learn to ride a bike without getting on the bike. You can't just have somebody tell you about it and say, oh, okay, now I'm good at it. You actually have to get out there and do it. And so that's the biggest thing. Learn the structure, learn what it takes to tell a good story, and then start working on it and get some feedback. And the skill will start to come. The skill will start to develop.
It's like anything, you will, with practice, hopefully you will get better, or you'll figure out, here are really the things I need to work on. And let's be honest, sometimes it's like, nope, I'm just not good at this. But there are also other resources. Toastmasters is one of the ones that I, refer people to. And it's funny, I've judged Toastmasters, but I've never participated in it. But it's one of those great resources that people can do that will kind of help them through this. It was, a resource that I used to tell people, I taught at Metro State in Denver for a while, taught communications, right? And my students would have to get up in front of the class and give presentations. And this one young lady, bless her little, she was, I'm going to throw up in the trash can. I mean, she tells me that, and I'm like moving away from the trash can. But, that was when I said, and she wanted to go into public relations. I was like, this is a challenge here, honey. But I told her, I said, you need to go to Toastmasters. And for some reason we didn't have speech classes and things like that. But and it was funny because she contacted me later and she said that really did help her. But that's just one of the tools that is out there. And now the nice thing is there's a lot of things that are online, and so many different ways where you can help your skills be improved.
Yeah. And the nervousness that she was feeling in that moment, I want to throw up in the trash can moment there, that comes from not having the practice and the experience.
Right.
The more you practice things, the more you work at them, the more comfortable and natural they become for you. And the easier it is to do them. You're always going to have some nerves. There's always a little bit of nervousness. And
you kind of need that adrenaline so that you're not up there going, hi, this is Deb Creer, and I'm going to be talking about.
Yeah, it keeps you sharp. It keeps you interesting. It keeps you motivated. But if they completely overwhelm you, then they get in the way.
Right.
And the bridge, the thing that bridges the gap between where it overwhelms me and where it's the right level is practice and experience.
Right.
It's just doing it.
Right. I loved your book. It had so many great tips to it. And one of the things that it talked about that I haven't seen anywhere else, so kudos to you, were the things like inflection, how to use body movement. And obviously I talk a lot with my hands, and I've knocked water over before when I've been giving a presentation. That was entertaining. And I can't, if I'm giving a speech and I have a microphone and the clicker, I'm like, I can't talk. But you talk in your book about that. And I thought that was so important because we focus on the words, but we don't focus on how we're delivering those words.
And we don't focus on the connection between the words and what we're doing with our body.
Right. Am I being so distracting by being propeller hands that, people aren't it's like we were saying before with people who say, it's too much. We focus on that as opposed to what they're saying. Right.
And there's a degree of those disfluencies, the ums, the uhs, the ahs, that are natural in our speech. And it's okay. So be aware of them. Don't get hung up on them is the tip that I always give to people. But when you're delivering your story and you get to the point that you really want them to catch from the story, stand still.
Right.
And pause and let that sink in. Maybe even repeat it and slow your language down. You can see I'm doing all the things that I'm talking about here to make to that one point. And sometimes we brush through it and then we wonder why people didn't get it. Well, everything kind of has to work together. This is where coaching is really helpful because sometimes you don't see what you're doing or what you're not doing. Talking about microphones, handheld microphones are a really interesting thing. I heard a professional speaker say, I do not want to use a lavalier. I want that handheld microphone because it forces me to keep this hand still. And if I don't have that hand still, I'm making too many gestures. I can do all the gestures I need with the one hand. And I want that to be right there. But the problem is if you're not used to a handheld microphone, the tendency is for that microphone to start drifting down.
And then you fade away.
Your voice gets so soft that no one can hear you. And you don't recognize that when you're the one standing up there doing it.
Because you hear it.
Exactly. You're hearing your voice just fine. And so that's where a good coach comes in to give you some of that feedback. We also have some tips in the book and in the workshop on getting coaching. That when you're starting out in storytelling, you don't want somebody to give you every single thing that you did wrong.
Right. Because then you're going to say, I can't do this anymore.
It's discouraging. You want people to tell you what was the point of the story that you took from it, because you want to see if that was consistent with the point that you were trying to make. And what did you like about the story? Start with those two pieces of feedback, then practice it again. And once you've practiced it a couple of times, then you want to ask, okay, was the length right? Was I going too fast? Was I going too slow? Are there other ways? And so we give you some specific questions that you can ask of people that are giving you feedback to help coach you along the way.
Right. And it is, like you said, there are these things that people just don't realize. I haven't done it for a while, but I used to do media training with people. And in particular, men were always a challenge. And the ones that we had difficulties with, what do you do with your hands, right? So gentlemen put their hands in their pockets. And there they've got their keys, they've got their coins, they've got every single thing that'll jingle, jangle, jingle all along. And they don't even realize that they've got their own little symphony background going on. So it's just a matter of take everything out of your pocket. You're more comfortable standing there with your hand in your pocket. That's okay. But don't have anything in there that you're going to be jingle jangling along. Or, you're in your chair. And for the people who are listening, my chair rocks. But I know, put both feet flat on the ground because that's going to keep me from moving. But again, that's where taping things is going to show you, oh my God, I didn't realize that I jiggled and moved and did everything I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, you were talking about teaching a college class, and I taught as an adjunct for a while. And I remember an experience distinctly. This young man named Josh was presenting, and he stood up in front of the room and he had in his hand a pen and threw out.
Oh, clicky, clicky, clicky.
This. And the farther he went, the faster he got on clicking his. He got about 3 minutes into this 10-minute presentation. And I said, okay, Josh, I got to call a timeout
for
a second.
Give it.
And I said, put your pen down. And he goes, why? He had no idea he was doing it. But I'm looking around the room at the other students, and they're all sitting there going, oh my God. They can't hear what he's saying because they're so distracted by that little body movement. So it's amazing how hard it is for us to just stand with our hands at our sides.
Right. Yeah. Or worse, to do the fig leaf.
Yeah. Where they're crossed in front of you. Yeah. Or we do at ease, where we put them behind us. Just be aware of what you're doing. And again, be intentional. Use hand gestures that make the point, that help get to what you're trying to talk about.
Right.
And so that, again, takes some practice to do that.
And that's where it's hard on Zoom, because our hands aren't really being shown. And when they are, they're just kind of these little floaty things that are there. But it does, we need to embrace the fact that, okay, we're probably going to use our hands for emphasis and to, all the various things that we do with them.
But even in a Zoom situation, there's a story I tell sometimes where I say the person stepped forward and I stepped back, and I'll do the lean back there. And it emphasizes that point, even with just that little bit of a movement back that I make. So you can intentionally incorporate some body movements and hand gestures, even in a virtual setting.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about the written story, because, I'm going to go back to the very start when I read your bio. That's obviously a written story. And I think it's so important that we're telling the stories as we're writing also. I tell people when they're working on their LinkedIn profile, tell your story there. Make people want to keep reading it. And if it says, hi, I'm Deb Creer, and I do this and this and this, and I went to school here and here, and they're like, no. So how do people work on their storytelling skills in writing?
Yeah. And it goes back to that intentionality. What are you trying to communicate here? What are you trying to get across? I think my LinkedIn bio starts with something like, I've had 3 careers and I'm in my favorite one right now.
That is what it says.
And that just immediately goes, oh, well, wait, what were those other careers and what are you doing?
And what's,
And so immediately you want to get something that catches their attention. And it's a way to stand out above other people. You think about all the different introductions and bios that you read. They almost all sound the same. And
I can tell when they've been written by a PR firm.
Well, and today, if they've been written by AI.
Right.
And AI is a good tool for certain things. But if you rely on AI to tell your story, it's going to sound like everybody else's story.
Right.
So start with the intentionality of what am I trying to communicate here? And what is the way that I can do that in a way that's engaging to the people that I'm talking to?
Right.
And that's a tricky thing in writing, because you're like, well, but I'm talking to everybody. Well, but who are the most important people for you to talk to?
Right. You're really not talking to everybody.
Yeah. If you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody.
Right.
And so it's getting down to what's the key point that I'm trying to get across here, and how can I get to that most efficiently?
Right.
The structure that we teach people in master storytelling of having an introduction, a conflict, and a change within your story, it's designed to prompt those brain chemicals that we've talked about. You can do the same thing in your writing. Use that same kind of structure, because you want to build into your writing some kind of point where people are going, oh, wait, what's going to happen next? Right. Or, oh, I'm interested in that. Or, hey, I can relate to this person. And so think of that as your structure, even as you're writing. And again, it begins with the intentionality. What am I trying to convey here, and who am I trying to convey it to?
And it is very much, as you said, getting their attention, because it's, are we going to read more? Are we going to read the next sentence, the next paragraph, all of those various things? And LinkedIn is probably one of the biggest examples of some of the absolute most boring things, or the thing that's even worse, they don't put anything, right? That's one of the things I tell people is you absolutely positively have to put something in your about section, and it shouldn't just be 2 sentences. It really does need to be your story. And it's interesting. I just used AI to rewrite a lot of my marketing materials. And it was it's always fun trying to figure out what to tell it, right? And I'm getting better at that, as opposed to just write a bio. It's going to go, but I use that as the starting point. Then I go back and it's like, that word is not a word I would ever use.
Right.
Now I might have to look in a thesaurus, but to me, and you would do the same thing if you were working with someone and they were writing it for you. So that's the thing with these tools is, use them as a starting point and then personalize it. I mean, and you absolutely have to personalize your story. That's what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And I love the point that you made there, that AI is kind of like hiring somebody else to give you a starting point on the writing. It's like hiring a ghostwriter, but you need to look at it and not just say, okay, I'll just take that. I started with the story of me ghostwriting a book for a friend of mine. Well, when I wrote that, I know this person very well. And so I was thinking very intentionally, what would it sound like if he said it? And so I was very intentionally trying to get it out of my voice into his voice. AI doesn't do that. AI takes a compilation of all the different voices, and it'll just write it out there in the most common way that it happens. So our job is to take that as a starting point and say, thanks for the tip, thanks for the idea, but that's not a word that I would say. That's not a phrase that I would use. And put your own unique voice in there so that it is actually you.
Right.
It goes back to the authenticity we talked about before. If your story sounds like everybody else's story, you're not going to stand out, and it could be inauthentic to those that are listening to it.
Right. And let's be honest, we need to stand out. I mean, that's the thing. What makes us unique in what we do? We might do we might be in an industry, like I'm a marketing person. There's lots of marketing people. So what makes me unique? Well, it's my story that makes me unique.
It's your experiences. And so that's why I also pull back to your personal experiences are the ones that matter, because that's what makes you unique. Now, it may be similar experiences to what other people had, which connects us, but your individual experience is what makes you unique.
Right. Well, oh my gosh, Mark, this has been so much fun. We have to do this again because I think it's very hopeful for folks. But until then, how do people find you and connect with you? And what are the services that you provide?
The best place to start is on our website, which is master-storytelling.com. So you have to have the little dash between master and storytelling to get to the right place. Start there. We have some free resources on the website that will also tell you when we're doing our workshops and give you an idea of the coaching that we provide for people. I also welcome people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to put a story out at least every week about what's going on and what I learned from that, and kind of prove that point that these stories happen to us all the time. So connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll answer any questions that you have there. But join us for a workshop or some coaching sessions, and we'll help you get to those stories so that you can connect with the people that you need to and really teach, lead, sell, and inspire in a more human and in a more effective way.
Right. And we've been talking about this as being a leadership skill. Folks, we're all leaders. In some way or another, we are leaders. And so this is a skill that we all should have.
Absolutely. And at the same time, we're all salespeople. It doesn't matter what you do. At some point, in some way, you are in sales. And so that's a skill that you can use for both leadership and sales that will help you stand out.
I love it. Well, like I said, Mark, this has been absolutely fascinating. And I love this discussion. So I can't wait to do it again. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
The final thing that I would leave people with is your story matters. Don't ever think, well, I'm just an ordinary person. I'm just an average Joe. It doesn't matter. My experiences can't really be that important to anybody else. No, that's wrong. That's false. Your story does matter. And so think about those moments where you learned a lesson, where you had an emotional reaction to something. What's the lesson that you can share with others there that will help you to teach, lead, sell, and inspire more effectively?
Oh, gosh, I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having such a fun discussion about storytelling with Mark Carpenter, who is a master storyteller. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.